Welcome, my bountiful friends. Pull yourself up a chair at the kitchen table. Make sure that you checked in with the apartment block babushka, booked your theatre tickets for the magician's show, and whatever you do, stay well away from trams, because today we're going to be delving deep into Mikhail Bulgakov's dark comedy masterpiece, The Master and the Margarita. Some countries have a great tradition of literature, more so than others. British, American and French literature all stand out as distinctive stars with their own history and evolution, and have been read far and wide, well outside their own geographical boundaries. Another country with a rich cultural tradition of literature is Russia. At the time of this recording, Russian culture is about as popular as German culture was in the 1950s. I want to make it clear that I'm not a proponent of the Ruski Mir and have no time for the current regime in Moscow. If you are Russian and watching this, and you're not a nationalist, then you have my sympathies and my respect. With all that said and out of the way, if I was to be told that I was going to be banished to a Siberian gulag and could only smuggle a single tome to keep me company in my bunk, then that book would be The Master and the Margarita. So let's find out more about it. Mikhail Afanasovich Bulgakov was born in 1891 in Kiev, Ukraine, which was at that time part of the Russian Empire. His father was a state councillor and a professor of theology, which meant that his family enjoyed an upper middle class existence. Bulgakov studied to become a doctor and served in a field hospital during World War I. When the Civil War broke out in 1917, he continued to serve the Tsarist forces, known then as the White Guards, in his capacity as a doctor. He was witness to the three-way struggle to take his home city of Kiev by the White Guard, the Bolshevik Red Guard and the Ukrainian nationalist forces. Witnessing the brutality and futility of war firsthand had a profound impact on him and would colour all his subsequent literary works. He began writing plays in 1919, and by 1925 he had 3 novels under his belt. Even his early writings contained veiled criticisms of the authorities. He was no supporter of the new communist regime, and repeatedly attempted to join his family who had fled to Paris. He even resorted to writing a letter to Stalin, which was a common thing for a citizen to do back then, and not as mad as it sounds now. Incredibly, it turned out that the chairman was aware of him and a fan of his play, The Days of the Turbines. Bulgakov would never be permitted to leave the country, but he was given a job as a playwright at the Moscow Arts Theatre by Stalin himself. And this served as a shield of protection for him, and is probably the primary reason why he did not become yet another victim of the purges, which were raging throughout the 1930s. Holding the new appointment, he attempted during the days to write pro-Soviet plays, and during the night he wrote anti-Soviet novels. Eventually even his plays were deemed inappropriate enough in tone and content to be banned by the censors. He was effectively stymied as an official writer, and he was cut off from his family. He was to die in 1940 at the age of only 48 from kidney disease. He started writing The Master and the Margarita in 1928 and wouldn't finish it until 1940, just months before his death. It evolved greatly during the 10 plus years of its development, and he revised it several times. He knew that there was little prospect of the book ever being published in the USSR. It was heavily critical of authority in general, and also directly referenced the purges. His wife, Yelena, was pivotal in getting the work published posthumously. A heavily censored version was released in installments in a literary journal in 1966 during Leonid Brezhnev's rule. Unabridged versions began to then appear on the underground samizdat networks that circulated throughout the Soviet Empire, joining the ranks of other works from the likes of that of Solzhenitsyn and Rybakov. The first complete uncensored version to see publication was in Frankfurt, West Germany in 1973, 33 years after Bulgakov's death. From this point on, there's going to be nothing but spoilers, so you might want to head back if you don't want to know what happens. So the main character of the book is the titular master. He is described as a gaunt, anxious man with a nervous demeanour, often dressed modestly. He appears worn down, reflecting his struggles and rejection by society. He is a writer who creates a novel about Pontius Pilate, which becomes central to the story. He represents the archetype of the misunderstood artist, and his love for Margarita provides the emotional core of the novel. Margarita is the titular co-protagonist of the book, and she's actually more active than the master in the story as a whole. She is described as beautiful with striking eyes and dark hair. She is often seen as radiant and passionate, embodying both sensuality and strength. Margarita is the master's devoted lover. She makes a pact with Woland to save the master and becomes a witch during the novel's famous satanic ball. Margarita's loyalty and bravery are key to the story's resolution. Pontius Pilate is the same person as that in the Bible. He is the Roman procurator or governor of Judea. He is depicted as a stern, commanding official with pale, troubled eyes that reflect his inner torment. He is a central figure in the master's novel, which tells the story of the trial of Yeshua HaNostri. Pilate is portrayed as a conflicted character torn between duty and his own moral compass. Yeshua HaNostri is a fictionalized version of Jesus from the Bible. Of particular note here, Bulgakov has given him his correct Aramaic name Yeshua, which is a variation of the more common name Joshua. He is a simple, kind man with a gentle demeanour. He is described as having an emaciated appearance with dishevelled hair and a peaceful expression. His interactions with Pilate explore themes of truth, morality and forgiveness, forming a key allegory in the book. Woland is a mysterious and elegant foreigner, and it's not revealed which country he's from. In fact, the people he encounters are confused by which country he's from, and it's my belief that his name is a mix of the French Roland and the German Wotan or Odin. He's often described as tall, thin and gaunt with piercing eyes. He has slightly crooked teeth and exhibits a mix of charm and menace. His attire is typically formal and striking, befitting his enigmatic personality. And it's quickly revealed that he is in fact the devil himself. He has arrived in Moscow with his entourage of demons to expose the hypocrisy, greed and corruption of Soviet society. His actions often cause chaos, but also reveal deep truths. Behemoth is a member of Woland's demonic entourage. He is a large, mischievous, talking black cat who often walks around on two legs. He can transform into a human-like figure, but his cat form is his most iconic appearance. Behemoth provides comic relief throughout his antics, such as causing chaos in a theatre and challenging Soviet authorities. Despite his humour, he is a powerful supernatural entity. Azazello is another member of Woland's demonic entourage. He is described as squat and fierce looking, with fiery red hair, sharp teeth, and a single fang protruding from his mouth. He is intimidating but composed. He is known for his pragmatic approach to tasks. He gives Margarita the magical cream that transforms her into a witch and facilitates her meeting with Woland. Hela is the only female member of Woland's demonic entourage. Her name is derived from the Norse goddess Hel, as in the Christian concept of hell comes from her as well. She is a beautiful, seductive woman with pale, almost translucent skin and red hair. She is often depicted as nude or in revealing attire. She is also a vampire, and she assists with tasks during the satanic ball and adds an element of mystique and sensuality to the group. Koroviev, aka Faggot, is the last member of Woland's demonic group. He is a tall, thin man with a mocking demeanour, pince-nez. His appearance is comical and absurd, often emphasising his role as a trickster. He is Woland's jester and assistant, orchestrating much of the chaos caused by Woland's group. He is a master manipulator and a source of dark humour. Mikhail Alexandrovich Berlioz is a middle-aged man described as being portly and well-dressed with a polished, intellectual air. He is the chairman of Mazalit, which is a Soviet literary organisation. Being a stout Soviet citizen, he is also a staunch atheist. He is one of Woland's first victims, meeting a grim fate under supernatural circumstances. Ivan Nikolaevich is a young poet who writes under the pseudonym Homeless. He is described as somewhat dishevelled and eccentric, reflecting his impulsive personality. He initially witnesses Woland's supernatural abilities and tries to warn others, which leads to his institutionalization. He serves as a bridge between the real world and the fantastical elements of the story. The Master and the Margarita is a complex, multi-layered novel that weaves together themes of love, morality, and the interplay of good and evil. Set in 1930s Soviet Moscow, the novel alternates between the story of the devil's visit to the city, the tragic love story of the Master and the Margarita, and the Master's novel about Pontius Pilate and Yeshua HaNostri, aka Jesus. The story begins in Patriarch Ponds, a fairly popular park in Moscow. Berlioz and Ivan Nikolaevich are visiting it and having a conversation about the myth of Jesus' existence and how there is no real evidence of him in all the documents and literature from that time. At that point, a mysterious foreigner suddenly appears and inserts himself into the conversation and sits on the park bench next to them. He gets them to affirm that they do not believe in God nor Jesus. The man congratulates them. This stranger is in fact the devil and is now in the guise of a mysterious foreigner named Woland. The conversation progresses to questioning who manages the affairs of the cosmos, and Woland then goes on to predict Berlioz's gruesome death, which will occur shortly after when he is decapitated by a tram. But before this occurs, Woland reveals to the men that they are wrong about Jesus, and no smart explanation is required, as he simply met him. He then proceeds to give an account of Jesus, which segues and continues as the narrative of the Master's untitled novel. Parallel to Woland's antics, the novel introduces the tragic love story of the Master, a disillusioned writer, and Margarita, his devoted lover. The Master has written a novel about Pontius Pilate's inner conflict during the trial and execution of Yeshua HaNostri. However, his work has been rejected by Soviet literary authorities, plunging him deep into despair. He burns his manuscript and voluntarily commits himself to a mental asylum. Margarita, distraught over their separation, is approached by Azazello and offered a chance to reunite with the Master. She agrees to become a witch and host Woland's extravagant satanic ball, a grotesque gathering of historical and fictional sinners. As a reward for her loyalty, Woland reunites Margarita with the Master and restores his manuscript, emphasising that manuscripts don't burn. Woland offers the couple peace and freedom from their earthly suffering by granting them eternal life together in a serene, secluded afterlife. This bittersweet resolution contrasts with the satirical and chaotic events in Moscow, where Woland's visit ultimately exposes the moral decay of that society. Interwoven with this narrative is the master's novel about Pontius Pilate. The Roman curate is tormented by his decision to condemn the innocent Yeshua to death, despite recognizing his wisdom and truth. Pilate's story reflects the broader themes of guilt, redemption, and the clash between power and conscience. The novel concludes with Woland and his entourage departing Moscow, leaving the city in disarray, but with lingering questions about good, evil, and the nature of humanity. The Master and Margarita's love transcends earthly constraints, and Pilate is finally granted peace from his torment. The novel is both a biting satire of Soviet life and a profound exploration of love, morality, and spiritual freedom. Its blend of fantastical elements, philosophical depth, and rich characterization has made it a literary masterpiece. First, we have to acknowledge that to truly assess a foreign novel's style and atmosphere, one should read it in its original language. The meaning of any sentence can drift considerably from its original form, and between differing translations there is also the risk of losing any underlying rhyming qualities or any hidden allusions. My review is based on the 1997 Penguin's classic English translation. There are 3 stories and 2 books within The Master and Margarita. There's the central story of the titular characters and their struggles over their love for each other and art. This story exists in the same world as the second story, which is Woland's intrusion into their world and his humorous escapades across 1930s Moscow. And then there's the third story, which is contained within the Master's untitled novel, which is about the arrest and crucifixion of Jesus. The sections of the story that concern Woland are heavily satirical, ironic, and very playful. It mocks the greed and corruption inherent in a supposedly non-materialistic Soviet society with glee. In contrast, the telling of the Master and Margarita's woes have a heavily romantic tone, which quickly gives way to a fantastical surrealism reminiscent of a fairy tale, when their story begins to entwine with Roland's, and Margarita embarks on a supernatural adventure to rescue the situation of the Master. Beneath all of this sits a philosophical and allegorical exploration of good and evil, morality, and the wants and needs of the human heart. Bulgakov's prose is always rich and heavy, with symbolism throughout. The third story, The Book Within a Book, is the Master's untitled masterpiece, and its style is quite different from the novel it sits within, although there are parallel themes, and therefore hence the inclusion of such an elaborately rendered piece of historical fiction. The tone is always deadly serious, mysterious, and ripe with foreboding. There are no laughs to be found here, as the familiar biblical story of Jesus' final days are allayed with a terrible realism from Pilate's perspective. First, we have manuscripts don't burn. This is Bulgakov's most famous quote. It's a battle cry to say that the written truth cannot be suppressed, and this is particularly true in the case of Samizdat, where an underground network is circulating countless copies of unprinted contentious literary works. The story of the Master has a clear parallel to that of Bulgakov's own life. Writing is the Master's life, but the Soviet literary authorities mock and dismiss his work, and the rejection leaves him clinically depressed, as well as facing professional ruin. Via the Margarita's faith in his ability and her actions, his novel is retrieved and restored. This is symbolic of the human need for creativity, the power of art, and the indestructibility of truth, even when it is being oppressed by an authoritarian regime. The second theme is Bulgakov's assertion that cowardice is the most grievous sin. Pontius Pilate is in the position of ultimate power in Judea, but even he, with the might of the Roman Empire behind him, has to carefully navigate the various demands of the local politicians, or else risk rebellion. He admires the calm, courageous and wise Yeshua, but must weigh the decision to free him against the outrage of the Pharisees if he fails to sentence him to death. In the end, he lacks the personal courage to make the right decision and suffers guilt for millennia afterwards. This, of course, mirrors the cowardice of all the authorities and bureaucratic lackeys within the Soviet system. Stalin was only one man, yet no one was capable of challenging him and preventing him from imprisoning and killing millions. And on a more mundane basis, no one was prepared to risk their own jobs or safety to question the arrests of friends and colleagues alike during the purges. The third theme is he who loves must share the lot of the one he loves. Again, this is very much related to the previous point. It's easy to tell someone you love them, but ultimately actions speak louder than words. And if you truly love someone, then you'll risk your own safety and your own career in an attempt to rescue them. And one must be prepared to join their loved one in the gulag if necessary. The Margarita remains devoted to the master, refusing to give up on him. Her love for him is pure and true. She goes to the ends of the earth and even ventures into hell itself to rescue the master from his fate, caring little for the risks to her own person. The Master and the Margarita had virtually no chance at all of passing through the Soviet censors. Its critique of the Soviet system was barely veiled at all, and it was steeped heavily in religious symbolism to boot, which was also unacceptable to an atheist state. Bulgakov would have been well aware of this and probably realised that its immediate future would be via the samizdat networks. When it was partially printed, long after his death in 1966, within a USSR whose nature had changed and mellowed considerably from that of the Red Terror of the 1930s, it became an instant sensation. The Soviet citizenry was highly literate, and the work sparked widespread conversations, particularly in intellectual and literary circles. The reaction of the Soviet critics themselves was varied, ranging from the dismissive, citing it as being too fantastical and in direct opposition to the preferred style of realism, to those who praised it for its daring imagination and innovation. When it was released globally in the 1970s, it was recognised immediately as a masterpiece. Western critics praised its satirical critique of authoritarianism, its complex narrative, and its exploration of morality and spirituality. The book has been an inspiration for many TV and film adaptations across the world and over the preceding decades. And today its name alone has joined the ranks of the highest literature. One may not have read it, but somehow they will almost certainly have at least heard of it. It is still widely read and enjoyed globally, and currently occupies the number 5 spot of Goodreads' greatest Russian novels of all time poll. The Master and Margarita is a novel that has it all. It has laughter, it has tears, it has mundane existence, it has supernatural events. Characters live, some die, some are imprisoned, some are released. It spans continents and empires, spans thousands of years. It's got the devil and it's got Jesus. It is lean and never bores. Each character brings something unique to the party, and the narrative can be interrogated and reinterpreted with multiple readings. The The book stands as a testament to Bulgakov's artistic brilliance, while the story itself is a retelling of his own troubled life and the many difficulties he faced. His was a life where one could not simply write what one wanted. The cost of not parroting the party line and staying within the bounds of acceptable behaviour was to be deprived of one's livelihood, or even possibly one's liberty. Fortunately for Bulgakov, he at least had the boss's favour, or else he would have indeed disappeared in the early hours of a Moscow night. Regardless of which lens we view the story through, the truth of human nature remains the same, whether a person lives under the oppression of the Roman Empire or the USSR. A person must choose whether they will be true to themselves, to their loved ones, or whether they will succumb to moral or physical cowardice and betray everything and everyone that they hold dear. If you're looking for a book with a deep moral story, or a modern fairy tale, or even a dramatic retelling of a well-known religious story, then I can make no higher recommendation than The Master and the Margarita. So what are your thoughts on this Soviet classic? Let me know your favourite character and your favourite scene in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell icon for more deep dives into the world of literature. Until next time, keep reading and beware of foreigners sitting on park benches. Do svidaniya.